here's something that I find really fascinating about you. There's many things I find fascinating about you. But your story is a little bit like that of Sliding Doors. In that, have you ever seen this movie?
Yeah, it's been a while, but I remember. Yeah,
Okay.
like little things can end up changing.
You were very close to being American.
Oh yeah, that story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was born in Iran. Obviously, my brother as well, and my parents were waiting for my brother, my little brother, to be born, as he was born in '79. This is just before the Islamic Revolution or during it. So at this point, most of my family had already moved to the States, early '70s, mid '70s, and by the time my brother was, I was going to say my son was born. My brother was born. My parents had sold their house. The visas to the States were done. We were going, as in like my uncles, my cousins, my grandmother, everybody lived in the States. And then same week we were moving. The hostage incident, not incident, the hostage taking, whatever, of the American
what Argo is about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Took place, and all the visas to the States were canceled. So my father and my mother made a last-minute decision, as my father was working for a Swedish company at the time, and he's from Iraq, so he had seen a previous revolution happen there in the 60s, and kind of felt that this is not going to end well. So, if we don't go to the States, we need to get out of here. So we moved to Sweden. That's where we ended up.
Wow. And how many weeks away were you from?
Literally a week. This is like, we had the last dinners sitting on the floor of the house, like the old school Persian way, on the rugs. Like everything was sold. Furniture was sold. Everything was gone. So this is literally the last week.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So perfect timing.
That's so crazy.
Otherwise I would have been a Californian boy.
You were moving,
not wearing this.
Yeah. San Diego.
Exactly.
What city
Berkeley.
was it? What city was it planned?
I ended up in a place, I was 3 years old. I didn't have much choice. Jönköping, which is like the Bible Belt of Sweden.
I didn't know Sweden had a Bible Belt.
Oh, yeah. This is a dark. This is like the Midwest of the southern Midwest, because Sweden is it's a long country.
So we're Midwest people.
It turns out to be correct. Yeah.
Where were you gonna move to in the U.S.
California?
California. Do you know what city?
Turlock, like outside LA. I think my uncle and everybody was. I think the place is called Turlock, but it was like LA.
Okay.
LA, outside LA.
Okay.
Where all the Iranian and Assyrian communities, kind of Assyrians, because I'm Assyrian, not Syrian, from the country of Syria. But the ethnicity Assyrians, they tend to kind of try to stick together, and if you have, so this is what happened in Sweden. There was a community of Assyrians in Jönköping, and this is where where we ended up living. No particular reason at all. Could have been Stockholm, should have been better, but instead we ended up in this godforsaken city, coming from Tehran, especially for my mom and my dad. They're used to cinemas, restaurants, nightclubs, bars being open till forever, and this is a place where 6 o'clock everything is closed. Olive oil was sold in pharmacies because that was considered being a health thing. So
what?
Yeah, coming from Iran, using spices and herbs like coriander and parsley, everything was dried. So if you imagine Russia or DDR, Soviet, but not Soviet or DDR, this was kind of the vibe. 1980, there's no, I was the only non-Swedish person until in my school, in my primary, from kindergarten and up. I was the only non-Swedish person until the 90s, where the Yugoslavian war and the war in Lebanon in end of 80s kind of triggered refugees to come to Sweden. But up until then, I was the only non-Swedish person.
So, I mean, forgive me for sounding maybe really dumb, but I'm really just curious. Did you feel it as a kid?
No, you're a kid. You don't know anything. You don't know better, so that's normal. And then it took a long time. Even when I turned 18, as soon as I turned 18, I moved to Stockholm because I knew the city. I wasn't meant to live there, just like that. But it took me even further into mid 20s, end of 20s, 30s, realizing that it doesn't matter how well I speak the language, how what do you call it? How well integrated you're in the country, however successful you get, etc. Doesn't matter. In Sweden, there's this weird. They like to have the image of Swedish people or Sweden being open-minded. That's obviously the last 5-10 years gone to shits. Because they have a pretty right-wing, kind of a very right-wing. I don't know what. It's not full-on right-wing, but it is. Yeah, they have a history. Conservative government. It's not conservative, but 50 years the Social Democrats were ruling Sweden, and they lay the foundation of what was usually used to make Sweden an example of how a country can do well with public health, public healthcare, education, etc. But that everything was privatized and sold out in end of 90s, and during 90s that's when the neo-Nazi right-wing movement, but that was like in the fringes. Okay. Now 20-30 years later, it's like everywhere else. They're in the parliament. I think the Swedish version of AFD here, the alternative for Deutschland, they would be the biggest political party before COVID. They were, I think, bigger than the Social Democrats, which is insane. Wow. Yeah. Like 4 years ago, when they actually were elected into the parliament, reaching well over 20%, that's like a fifth of the Swedish population, finding this political party being absolutely a fine alternative to your government. And this political party actually stems from a neo-Nazi movement in the 90s, full on, like neo-Nazi. It's not like they just came out of nowhere wearing suits, but the original founders of this political party it's a neo-Nazi party. Is Sweden where there's that monument of the woman who's hitting the person with the purse? I don't know if it's a monument now, but maybe they made it into a monument. Yes. It is in Sweden, yeah. Yeah, what city was that? I don't remember, but it's like where I come from, down in the... Is that the movement that you're speaking to, that she was hitting them with the purse? It started in the south, actually, the south of Sweden, Skåne, which is the south. Okay. But it's obviously spread around the whole, not the whole world, the whole country. And yeah, it's scary to see a place you grew up in being, you would travel outside Sweden and people, oh, you're from Sweden, must be fantastic, but growing up there is a different vibe when you realize, as I said, as a kid, you don't really know what racism is or find it weird. That's just how you're treated until you realize when you're well over your 20s that doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how well you speak the language. Doesn't matter where you live. It's still, you will never be integrated in the country. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's a beautiful place to grow up in. Yeah, but hey. Upwards and onwards. So in the spirit of you being a Iranian-born, almost American, Swedish man living in Berlin, Ashley made something. What? That has nothing to do with any of those. She remembers my... Oh, I was just gonna mention it in the kitchen. I'm like, I knew. Yes. Salsa. So where is she? We just have a no double dipping rule. And only now, pre-COVID, or that was pre-COVID as well? That's pre-COVID. That shit was always gross. But interesting. What, single dip? Yeah. But enjoy. These, cheers. Yeah, and I'm gonna get this the finest tortilla chips that money can buy in Germany. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.